Press your thumb against a glass of water right now. Lift it away and look at what you left behind. A pattern of loops and whirls pressed into the glass in oil and sweat, unique enough that a database somewhere could pull your identity out of it in seconds. Most people assume that's the whole story. Fingerprints exist so police can catch you, so your phone can recognize your thumb, so a hospital can confirm which newborn belongs to which mother. But that's a use we found for them thousands of years after they already existed. The actual biological question is much stranger, and for over a century, scientists could not agree on the answer. The obvious guess is grip. Ridges on skin should work like tread on a tire, biting into a surface and increasing friction so your fingers don't slip. This was the accepted explanation for most of the 20th century, repeated in textbooks without much testing because it seemed too obvious to need proof. In 2009, a biomechanics researcher at the University of Manchester named Roland Enos decided to actually test it. He and an undergraduate student built an apparatus to measure the friction between a bare fingertip and a sheet of acrylic glass, applying different amounts of force and checking whether the ridges were pulling their weight. With ordinary solid materials, friction rises in direct proportion to the force pressing two surfaces together. That's basic physics. If fingerprints were built for grip, that relationship should hold, or even improve, since the ridges give the skin room to flex and grab. On smooth surfaces, the ridges reduced friction. A smooth, unbroken pad of skin, the kind found on your palm or the sole of your foot, actually makes better contact with glass or acrylic than a ridged fingertip does, because more of the surface is touching the material at any given moment. Fingerprints work against you on smooth surfaces, not for you. That result upended 100 years of assumption in a single afternoon in a lab, and it left researchers with an uncomfortable admission. The one explanation everyone had been repeating with total confidence was wrong, which meant the actual reason we have fingerprints was still open. One possibility researchers came back to was rough terrain. A smooth pad might make ideal contact on flat glass, but tree bark, stone, and uneven ground are a different problem. On those surfaces, ridges may be able to flex into small grooves and pits in a way that flat skin can't, increasing the contact area on irregular terrain even while losing it on smooth terrain. This idea gets indirect support from an odd source. Fingerprints aren't unique to humans, or even to primates generally. Koalas have them too, nearly identical in structure to ours down to the microscope, despite koalas being marsupials with no close evolutionary relationship to us at all. Two completely separate branches of the mammal family tree independently arrived at the same ridge pattern on the same part of the body. And the one thing gorillas, chimpanzees, and koalas share that a dog or a cat does not is a life spent gripping and climbing branches. Convergent evolution like that is usually a sign that a trait is solving a real physical problem, even when the exact mechanism is still being worked out. A separate team at Seoul National University focused on water rather than friction on dry surfaces. Skin that's too dry doesn't grip well, and skin that's too wet, saturated in sweat or rain, doesn't grip well either, since a thin film of liquid between your finger and an object acts like a lubricant. Somewhere in the middle is an optimal moisture level where grip is strongest. In a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, the Seoul team used imaging techniques across multiple wavelengths to watch what happens to moisture at a fingertip over time. They found that the grooves between ridges function as tiny channels, wicking excess moisture away from the point of contact and regulating it toward that ideal middle range automatically. Your fingerprint manages the water content of your skin, so your grip stays in the zone where it actually works. That still leaves the question of touch, and this is where the research gets genuinely surprising. In 2021, a team at Umeå University in Sweden, led by researcher Ewa Jaraka, inserted electrodes into the main nerve of the upper arm in volunteers and swept a card covered in tiny raised dots across their fingertips, recording exactly which nerve fibers fired and when. What they were mapping is a receptive field, the small patch of skin that a single sensory neuron is responsible for monitoring. The answer turned out to be about 0.4 millimeters wide, which is almost exactly the width of a single fingerprint ridge. Your nervous system treats each individual ridge on your fingertip as its own separate sensor, feeding a channel of information to the brain. A related line of research on the mechanoreceptors involved suggests the ridges may also work as a kind of filter, shaping incoming vibrations so the nerve endings underneath can detect them more precisely, in the same way a car radio filters signal from static before it reaches the speaker. This is very likely the strongest candidate for what fingerprints are actually built for: reading the world. There's a related mystery that connects to all of this, and the science here hasn't settled yet. If you sit in a bath or a pool for more than about 5 minutes, your fingers wrinkle. Most people assume this is water soaking passively into the skin. The wrinkling is a response controlled by your nervous system, caused by blood vessels constricting under the fingertip, and it doesn't happen at all in people with certain types of nerve damage in their hands. In 2011, evolutionary neurobiologist Mark Chengizi proposed that finger wrinkles act like mountain drainage networks. Much like tire treads, they channel water away to help us better grip wet objects. A follow-up study in 2014 tried to reproduce that result and could not. Then in 2021, a much larger study of over 500 participants found that wrinkled fingers did restore grip efficiency on wet objects to something close to normal dry hand levels. So, the honest answer, right now, is that nobody fully agrees on this one. The wrinkling might be a genuine adaptation for wet grip, or it might be an evolutionary leftover doing very little for us today. The research keeps landing in different places depending on who runs the experiment, and there isn't a clean resolution to point to. The pattern itself, the specific arrangement of loops, whorls, and arches that makes your print different from every other human being who has ever lived, comes from somewhere else entirely, and it starts before you're born. Fingerprint ridges begin forming around week 13 of pregnancy and are fully set by around week 24. A team led by geneticist Dennis Haddon at the University of Edinburgh sequenced gene activity in developing fingertip cells and identified 3 signaling systems doing the work. A pathway called WNT that stimulates cells to grow upward into ridges. A pathway called BMP that suppresses growth to carve out the grooves between them. And a third signal, EDAR, that fine-tunes how wide and how far apart the ridges sit. WNT and BMP work in opposition, spreading across the fingertip in alternating bands, and where they land relative to each other is shaped by small random variations in blood flow, growth timing, and the position of the finger in the womb. This is why identical twins who share the same DNA do not share the same fingerprints. Their genes set the general pattern, the broad category of loop or whorl or arch, which is somewhere between 65 and 96% heritable and tends to run in families. But the fine detail inside that pattern, the precise point where one ridge splits into 2 or dead ends against another, is written by chance during a 3-month window in the womb that no 2 fingers, not even on the same hand, experience identically. The single feature we use to prove exactly who somebody is, the trait so unique that courts and border agents and unlocked screens all rely on it, may not be a feature evolution selected for it all. Grip on rough terrain and in water, and touch, sharp enough to feel a single ridgeline, those look like the traits natural selection was working on across millions of years. The uniqueness, the specific fingerprint that is permanently yours, might just be static, a byproduct of a growth process that was optimizing for something else and happened to leave behind a pattern too complex for chance to ever repeat. Nobody has definitively settled whether the uniqueness itself matters biologically or whether we simply found a use for the noise. What is fairly certain is this. Every time you pick up a wet glass, or feel the grain of a piece of wood, or press your thumb onto a scanner to unlock your phone, you're using a structure that took shape before you had a working brain to think about it. Built from a chemical argument between 2 competing signals that started when you were the size of a grape. Koalas built the same solution, on the other side of the evolutionary tree, for reasons science still has not fully agreed upon, somewhere between grip, moisture, and touch. Press your thumb to the glass again, and feel every ridge answer you back.